Allow me to continue where we left off. I am still trying to calculate the values of A, H, and K, where H and K are the vertex. From y is equal to x squared, now this is a very important parabola because it is the most basic. It may be useful if we can expand this in some sort of creative way that makes it obvious what A, H, and K is. These two quantities are equivalent. So as we are able to see, A is equal to 1, H is equal to 0, and K is equal to 0. Now what are some lessons you can learn when it's expressed as only as x squared? Well, I guess the H value would be 0. What constant did you add K? Well, you didn't add a constant, there was none, so it is also 0. From my little picture here, I can easily determine that my vertex here is at 0, 0. And I do have an upward opening parabola. Now, let's move on over here. Now, this is a little devious one, I think. Now, if you notice, the vertex form says nothing about dividing by 3. There's the vertex form right over there. I'll try to borrow it, as a matter of fact. Here's the vertex form. I'm just going to move that over here so we are able to see. Now, the vertex form is the coefficient A is in front. But suddenly I get this wonderful idea that dividing by 3 is the same as multiplying by a third. So yet again, I'm able to see, if I look at this slightly differently, that dividing by 3 is the same as multiplying by a third, we're able to pick out our A, H, and K values relatively straightforward. So my vertex here is going to be -1, 4. So we have an upward opening parabola with my vertex -1, 4, so that's going to be over there. It's going to be in the third quadrant. It's going to go up, and that's all we have to it. All right. We're going to move on to something a little bit different here. No longer sketch the graph, but rather graph. Now, definitely initially, as we head into the unit, and we're starting to know parabolas, we're going to graph 5 points. Later on, when we get a little bit wiser, we're able to choke that down a bit. So I'm just going to calculate x, y. What point do we need? The vertex. Well, my vertex here is 1, -2. I can get that by looking at the values of h and k. So in my table of values, I'm just going to put 1, 2. And then I'm going to move, so -2, so that's down here. And then I'm going to ask myself, well, what is the y value when x is 0, when x is -1? Now, basically, I'm trying to center my graph around the vertex. And what we do is we take the x value and we plug into this equation. Now, I am going to take only one of the values, so I'll just write down the values that I've previously determined. So what we must do, for instance, when x is equal to -1, what is y? For each of these, we have to determine the y. Well, except for the vertex, because that's what you're given. So for instance, if I want to know what is the y value when x is equal to -1, I put in the f of -1 is equal to 2, and instead of x, I write -1 minus 1 squared minus 2. And then I just clean this up through the orders of operations. So the f of -1 is 2 times 4, right? Because -2 squared is 4. Subtract 2, so that's equal to 6. That's why I have -1, 6 as a point. The x value is -1, the y value is 6. So that's how I got that point. Regardless, I'm just going to start graphing. I'm having fun. And there are my points to graph. believe. There's my parabola. Let's move on to the next example here. So again, I'm going to choose to write this in a different way, just so that it's so incredibly pleasing to my eye that it's hard to miss, that the vertex is going to be 1, 3. So again, I'm just going to say x, y, 1, 3 is definitely a point on this parabola because it's the vertex. I'm going to take 2 point x values to the left, 2 to the right, higher and lower. I calculate my y values from this, and I get 7/2 for 0 and 7/2 for 2. And I get 5 for -1, and I get 5 for 3. So again, I'm just going to show you one. So that is my table of values. So I have 0.1, 3, 0, 7/2, 2, 7/2. Now 7/2 is really 3.5. And 3, 5, and -1, 5. Ooh, incorrect, -1, 5. Now, I'm going about this very oddly, but I'm actually using the axis of symmetry, something that we're about to learn. There, that's what this parabola looks like. That looks like a good parabola. But how do we calculate the y values? Simply by taking an x value and plugging it into the function. So I'm going to take x is equal to 2 and see what I get. So the g of 2, that is when I plug in 2 into my function g, it is really x minus 1 squared, sorry. It's really 2 minus 1 squared divided by 2 plus 3. And the g of 2 is going to be 1 over 2, but only the numerator is squared, 3. So I get 1/2 plus 3. You settle on a common denominator of 2, so that's 6/3. So that's 6/2. So that'd be 7/2. So really, this is just sort of grade 4, grade 5, adding fractions type stuff. I mean, simply because it's grade 4 or grade 5 doesn't make it easy, though. But it's adding fractions. So that's how the point 2, 7/2 came along. Now again, what is the most important point? The vertex. What do you do after that? You simply take your x values to the left and to the right and see what comes to be.